Now I'd like to turn to Phillip Crews, who owns a company called Miniatures by Philip. I first found Philip on the internet because I saw one of his models and I was just intrigued. And I started talking to him a little bit and got more intrigued. And I think you will be too. So Philip, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Yeah, I was going to start out by showing some methods of making a brick. And this is an actual cement. Unfortunately, I started it too early. It's done kind of hard, but you can take a tool, even though it's this hard, it doesn't get too hard. You can draw stone. You want to try to get it fairly deep. I didn't do it deep enough to actually make it a 3D. And then you just go in and paint. On the brick, at this stage of hardness, I will use a hacksaw blade, and I'll try, depending on the scale you're wanting, just drag it across and just work it in freehand. And if it's more pliable, more wet, it's a whole lot easier to work with. And you can just either jog it out. I normally will take an air hose and just clean it out. And then I will take most anything, shish kebab stick and something, and just, as I did with the stone, just draw it in. And Tom, if you would show the Carter house, that is the actual, what I did earlier in the week. This is it. So the mortar joints are actually mortar. The base down here is just the natural color of the cement. And this is another little house that did the same way. Now, occasionally, I will carve the brick. Now, this is carved in with the Dremel and with the oscillator cutter, and or actually with my bandsaw. I would do the horizontal lines with the bandsaw, and then I would come back in with the Dremel and do my vertical joints just by, and they too need to be fairly deep. Generally, I'll go one full row because it gives it more of a 3D realistic effect if you get it down in there deeper. And then just paint the whole thing with the color of a gray that you want. Then I generally wipe off the excess because I'm just wanting to get it down in the mortar joints. And in this case, I used the cutter, and I just more or less went, I just freehanded this. It's kind of rough, and I just drew it through there. The easiest way to do it is if you've got a small table saw, I turn my blade to 45. I want as little bit of the blade as possible to actually be touching the wood. I just want to catch the corner. So I will start out about right here, depending on the size brick I want. And I start out about right there. And I would normally cut the first row just by pushing it through. Then I would move it over. I usually step it over, put me a mark to step it over, whatever size brick I want, run it back through there. You can actually do that pretty fast. And then you can take the Dremel. I did this one too fast. I got the lines a little bit close together, didn't cut the vertical lines deep enough really, but that gives you an idea of some ways of making some realistic brick or stone. If you're a good painter of stone, I just mixed up 3 shades of a red, more of an orange and a brown, and just painted a few of them in. This is not the stage you would want to paint it. The mortar is still real dark. The gray is going to change the color to it's go more muted. But that's kind of a couple of ways of doing brick that look very realistic. And the material I use, this is the only thing I have found that works. There's a lot of brands of patch. Lowe's carries a bunch, but they don't carry this. I find this at Ace. It has the right amount of cement and sand. The ones I get at Lowe's, yeah, it has too much sand. It's too gritty. You can't really work it out for real fine brick. And I'm kind of trying to remember where we wanted to go from here. Jim, you want to kind of direct
Yeah,
me? Okay,
Philip,
I think let's go maybe talk about maybe shingles, for instance. You can
we-
always find old thrown away tar paper, usually at a building site or whatever. And I just take a utility knife and strip it down in the little strips, and I just glued it on. This was done last week, so it's gotten dirty in my shop. And then I will take, after I just use regular wood glue, I would take a knife, not a plastic knife like this, and I just go down and actually cut into it to make the tabs. I'd actually use the utility knife, not something like this. And that makes a real good, realistic. To get that color, it's just black. And I take a white paint and I'll just push that after I shake it, I'll just push that nozzle till it just barely comes out. It's more or less just a sprinkling. And it will make it look like the sand, more or less, on a shingle. And what I do a lot of, and people are always asking me, well, how do you do your metal roofing? Well, I'm going to show you on that. I'm going to need my hacksaw blade again. In my table saw channel, I cut a piece of wood that was that wide that will hold. I put the dual side of the hacksaw blade, if I can get it in. Okay. I want it to be down enough to. Now I use different material. Normally I have been always using metal, aluminum flashing, but my wrist is getting to where when I do the metal, it just, I'm keeping tendonitis. Lowe's also carries a vinyl with a coating of copper. And this makes a very good roof. And you can spray over it with red amber and with an etch. And you can just put your ribs however you want it, however close you want, and there's no stress or strain. Also, I use a vinyl, it fell off, that I get at Lowe's. This is a whole lot cheaper. And this is what the store is made out of. This is actually a vinyl. I have to fill up it sometimes to tell the difference. But you can just put the vinyl, and it's very easy to mold. Just pull it right down through there, step it over however far, pull it again. And I'm sure some of you can come up with a device that will do that a lot simpler than this, but it took me quite a while to come up with a way, an easy way and a fast way to doing my tin. I try to make everything on my buildings. I do my own gas pumps. I do my own window trim. I do my own signs. I have those printed on a bumper strip material. Then I stick them onto the metal and cut around them. Of course, I do all my own brick. I did this out of a sponge. So I generally 99.5% of what I do is it's things that I make myself. And I'm always learning new tricks. Lattice is one of the hardest things to make and make it look neat. And I had a building with a whole lot of lattice on it recently, and happened to remember I had some of the gutter guard I got from Lowe's. And so you can just paint it, and you can cut it with a good heavy pair of scissors, and it makes for a good lattice. So I'm going to see if there's some questions at this point.
well, Philip, I've got some. When you and I were talking, one of the things that amazed me is that basically you take whatever's around and use it for your building. Whatever you think is appropriate, you'll figure a way to use that kind of material or that kind of piece of whatever and convert it into a model.
I do. Like last night, I built this old barn out of some old wood off of my barn down back.
Can you get closer to that so we can actually see it better? Yeah.
And this one was hard to work with on the framing of it because it is 150-something-year-old chestnut that I used on the inside. I have had some barn doors in my barn for years, and I had no idea what the wood was, and it turned out to be wormy chestnut. And normally I just use the outside of the wood. I shave it on my table saw. I'll cut it this width first, and then I'll go back through with it faced against the guard, and that way I get the thickness of the wood I want. And what's left
Philip,
would
let me
be
ask you,
something like this. And so that's my
Philip,
framing material and my rafters.
Philip, let me ask you this. What thickness do you not prefer to use for wood?
Well, I prefer oak works real good. That's what this is. Last night, depending on the amount of time, I was going to show, and I can do this next time, on how I built this barn. First, you just start out with your 2 exterior walls and put your wood on, and there's a reason for doing that, because once you put your cross pieces on, and you frame out for your doors and everything, but these will cut out once the barn is built. But once you do that, I'll show how that you how do you figure your rafters and your bird mouth. That way the bird mouth will sit over this. If you do the rafters first, then you got to cut these around where the rafter tails hang down, and it's just a lot of time. So just knowing that cuts it cuts a lot of time off of building this little barn, which is very simple at that point.
Philip, let me ask you this. What thickness of wood do you use?
What thickness? Okay, I've got this down to about 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
But the wood is so it varies so much because of the age and the wear on it. It's going to be thinner on some pieces. On your guide, it'll come out. I won't ever be able to find one right now, but you'll have some to where it will almost be paper thin. And so if I'm going vertical, now if I'm going with a lap siding, which I do a lot of barns where I do the lap siding, now I've got to cut it pretty thin. Pretty well, I need a poplar, a tulip poplar, yellow poplar for that. And that wood is, of course, a lot more silverish gray. I do like the poplar very much. I don't have any there, but it's very forgiving when you saw it thin.
Where do you get all this wood from?
Well, this come off of my barn, but you'd be surprised at how much I see and find at here we have dumpsters we take our trash to, and there are bins there where contractors and people that are tearing down something, old fences or whatever, and they'll just throw the wood in there, and they don't mind you getting it out. And you could find some good wood with a good patina. Of course, you could do the same thing using popsicle sticks if you wanted to. Cut the square end off and just glue them on, paint it white or paint it red, barn red or whatever. I like working with the rustic. I like things to be distressed, I guess, most of what I do, except for custom work. And if I do custom work, I do exactly what it is. And I don't know whether Phil was able to get the Union Station up on the screen tonight that I sent. That's a good example of working with this cement. It is. Okay.
That's a huge structure.
It is. That's a huge building. I think top of if I remember, I may be wrong, the top of those towers are like 300 something feet. At G scale, that thing is about if I remember, about 40 inches tall. That is a huge building. Also did the AT&T Tower, which is quite large for him. He has quite a, that's Jim Miller in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. He has one of the largest G-scale trains in the country. He has, I don't know, 100 engines, 500 cars. It's just, and while I was working on the Union Station, the tornado that hit Nashville, Mount Juliet, hit his yard. It missed his storage building where the train cars was, but it totally took every tree out and in his entire layout. Luckily, he didn't have nothing but track out at the time, but I was working on the Union Station when that happened. So.
Well, that must have been scary for him. Well, listen, I know that you've got to get out of here because you do at your church, but I look forward to hearing from you again next week, Phil. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
And we'll see you next week. You take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.